glad to see you all are here, especially Mr. Alamy. I hope you're okay.
The violence will not stop me. I still stand for
Excellent.
peace.
Nice to come
I will not let my attackers win.
You're an example to us all.
Thank you.
All right, so welcome to what we expect to be the final session of the Appeal Commission, April 19th, 1937. We, again, were distressed to hear about the attack on Mr. Alamy. From the initial reports, it was apparently a band of Arab ruffians that were upset with him for negotiating and attending the Appeal Commission, but we are glad he is not to be swayed by violence. We're happy to welcome the press. I'm Lord Peel, chair of the commission. We're just going to go around and everyone just give their role and title.
I'm Professor Reginald Copeland, co-commission chair.
Auni Abdul Hadi, and I guess my position is just on the Arab side.
I'm Raghib Nashishibi.
I'm Al-Hajj Amin Al-Husseini. I'm the Mufti of Jerusalem.
I'm Musa Alamy.
I'm David Ben-Gurion, head of the Jewish Agency Executive.
I'm Vladimir Jabotinsky, father of revisionist Zionism.
I'm Dr. Magnus, rabbi and moderate Zionist.
I am Dr. Chaim Weitzman, president of the Zionist organization.
I'm Rabbi Mayor Jacobson, and I represent the religious Zionist community.
Okay, so we'd like to start again with some testimony from anyone that has any concerns with the Commission's report. Any points you'd like to point out, or yes?
The division of land is, I think, something that should be pointed out based on the map. It's not very pleasing to everyone, I would say.
Okay, so what would you recommend?
Well, we kind of came up with something that would, involve less displacement of people. In the original map, Tulkarm and Jenin, where...
Is your map up on the board?
No, sort of, yes. But we just edited yours, if you'd like to see it.
Right.
Because Tulkarm and Jenin are both almost 100% Arab, and, having them all move, that's a lot of people. And Safat has a good percentage of Jews, and we realize that city has some meaning in Judaism, so we felt that there could be better borders.
Okay. Mufti?
Well, contrasting to what Musa Alamy has put forth right now, as the leader of the Arab delegation, I'm not prepared to accept this agreement as it stands. We're not for partition whatsoever, and in addition, the number of Zionist immigrants allowed is entirely too high, and we need to change that in order to even be asked to stay at the negotiating table. And lastly, what the commission has proposed to do with the holy places is unspeakable for Palestinian Arabs. There's no way that Jews should be allowed to come into this land and all of a sudden have half of a stake in what's going on in the holy places. These are our places, and having come in the last 30 years does not give them the right or even the religious clout to have say in what goes on there.
Zionist, would you have any response to the criticisms of your fellow Arab interlocutors?
Well, on the point of the holy places, I would like to add that I agree with the Mufti that what the Commission has chosen to do with the holy places is in some respects unacceptable, and I would urge you to reconsider what you want to do with the holy places. But I would also add that the Jerusalem belongs to the Jews and the Arabs and the Christians, so we should think about that when we're thinking about what we want to do with that area.
With regards to the holy places, Mufti and Dr. Magnus, do you have any specific recommendations of how that can be split up or to accommodate both sides?
Yes.
Or
Specifically, in my response, in my written response to the commission, it's imperative that we maintain the status quo that has been in place for the last, millennium or such. Like, it's not okay that Jews come in within the last 3 decades and all of a sudden have equal clout. And what I'm saying is that we aren't trying to stop Jews from worshiping. But when Jews come in and start changing the face, even if it's not permanent changes like you said in your report, when they start changing the face of Haram al-Sharif, it's not okay. And it makes Palestinians fear for their existence. It's a metaphor in essence. Bringing chairs and stanchions, it just means that they're coming in and their presence, they feel like changing their presence even though they're a significant minority in this land, and they just plan on growing. And that's what Palestinians see, and that's what I'm here to prevent. So that's why it's really about maintaining the status quo and keeping the control of these places in the hands of Arabs. And as a concession, I'm willing to allow a few Sephardic Jews to weigh in and in the sort of leadership. And as you proposed to have a Holy Places Council, a Council of the Holy Places. I forget exactly how you worded it. We already have one, and that's the Supreme Muslim Council. So I urge you to realize that since the majority of people in this land are Muslim, and we are willing to look out for the Jews' ability to worship, but changing the status quo just makes Arabs fear for their existence.
So it's a continuation of Supreme Muslim Councils.
And we're willing to concede some seats, or not seats, but some of the responsibility of maintaining the holy places to some Sephardic Jews, so that they're able to weigh in and say things that aren't going the way that they went. Like we don't want them to feel like second-class citizens, but it's not okay that they're coming in and having half of the decision-making power. That's not.
So under would it be under the Supreme Muslim Council's oversight?
Yeah, that's pretty much how. If it hasn't been the Supreme Muslim Council, it's been something similar over the past millennium. And
would you trust the British to overlook what the Sephardic Jews would be the responsibilities they'd be taking on, or
specifically, what do you mean?
Specifically, instead of the Supreme Muslim Council having control over what they do?
As long as the status quo of the holy places is maintained, and I, as Mufti, am able to oversee it directly, then whatever you call the council is up to you.
I think that since the places are holy to all three traditions of the people of the book, that we should really take that into consideration and give that as much importance as the Mufti is giving to having Arab dominion over Jerusalem. Jews are immigrating to Palestine, and there's nothing that anybody can do to stop it. There has been a status quo in Palestine for millennia, but it's shifting now. So the only thing to do is to address it and address it in a realistic way. You can't reverse the hand of time. You have to go forward with it. So I would agree with your proposal of having the Jewish dominion over the Western Wall and Arab dominion over Haram al-Sharif. And I would also agree with having British patrols overseeing the area to make sure that there's no escalation of violence there, because it is a holy place, and as such, that is why there is such importance there for Jewish people. So that is why we are immigrating here, and we pray about it, and it's just of supreme importance to us.
So what you take issue with in our report is the fact that we have one council that oversees all of them. You would rather see the division, each site, which is specific to its religion, left up to that religion to administer.
Sure. That is the way that we could do it. I just wouldn't want to have any limitations of anybody going to pray or visit.
That was not the intent in our report, to limit it. The idea of the integrated council was that to allow open access for all, and the integrated council would ensure that would be the case.
that's something that I'm on board with.
The Arab delegation is not prepared to accept any sort of integrated council or partition for that matter.
So you just want Arab?
Well, this, like I said, maintenance of the status quo is imperative here.
Okay, Mufti, I understand your concerns, and I understand that you think of us as conquerors of your land, but I don't want you to think about that.
I'm speaking for my people, so I can't change. I can't personally see to it that their minds are changed.
Okay, then what would be your solution if we weren't able to
Well, the solution number one is limit Zionist immigration, and number two is to maintain the Arab rule of the region, allow the Jews to live as a minority in the way that they have already. But a partition, we're not willing to give up land that has belonged to us for the last 1,300 years just because you've come in the last 30.
And you're very adamant about limiting immigration as well, right? So,
Absolutely.
So what is your solution for the Jewish refugees? Do you have any concern for them, or is that your
There are
problem?
no Jewish refugees at this point. They've bought up all of our land, so there's no refugees. They're already living
What
there.
in Europe? Let's say in
Or
Europe.
purchase legal.
They're not refugees as of this point. You're trying to use a crystal ball to see the future right now. And I personally, as the leader of the Palestinian Arabs, my primary concern is to look out for my people. And just because to accommodate your people would mean to push my people into the Jordan Valley, and that's not okay.
Rabbi Jacobson, just with regards to the holy places, and in terms of the Orthodox community, what?
Well, I am actually okay with a joint council because I do understand that Jerusalem and the holy places share significant values between both religions, and if integrating and working together can create some sense of peace, then I am okay with that. I'd also like to thank you for the partitions because those are extremely important to the Orthodox religion and to worship in Orthodox religion. I had a few problems though with Jerusalem, and mostly I had a problem with, at the end of the commission, you say that Jerusalem will be controlled by the British for 100 years and then given over to whichever sector it lies in, and that would be the Arab sector. And I'm not comfortable with the Arabs having complete control over Jerusalem. I can live with it being an international zone because I think that will keep the peace. But I do not trust the Arabs to let us practice our religion freely there without any hostility, especially because most of Jerusalem, a large population in Jerusalem is Jewish. It's 41% Jewish. So I do not trust that. I do not like the Arabs having complete control over Jerusalem. I think if that happens, I'd like either half control or at least, no, I'd like half control of Jerusalem if that's going to happen then.
Okay, take that into consideration.
Mr. Jabotinsky, I believe you have something to say.
Yeah, so in regards to immigration, despite what the Mufti is saying that it's simply not enough, I don't see 40,000 being enough. I mean, my colleagues and I have demanded much more, and you claim that you have decided on 40,000 due to the fact that you don't think the land that you are, allotting for our canton, as you propose, just cannot absorb any more than that. But I really don't think that's up for you to decide. I mean, we are trying to save people's lives here, and our concern isn't how comfortably people will be able to settle in the land. It's really more about how many people we can get into the land and save them from Hitler's disgustingness. So
The issue of the absorptive capacity does not concern how comfortably people will live on the land, but how the land can sustain the people on it. So if there are too many people for the land, the people will not thrive on the land. That is what we mean by the absorptive capacity.
okay, well, we will use our European education to find ways to better the land and to continue to have it support the people that reside on the land. I don't think that our concern right now is saving people. It's not about whatever you are claiming. So I just think that I demand that you reconsider this number.
What number would you be looking at, like unlimited immigration, or?
Yes, ideally unlimited.
We like to
That's
maximize as much as possible until we can. and until we can say the Jewish who are being persecuted right now. I don't think there's an exact number of 40,000 per
I mean,
year.
I'd push for 50 to 60,000, but unlimited would be lovely.
And what if we opened up another area for Jewish immigration?
Where?
Possibly Uganda? We're open.
Uganda? How about Transjordan?
Transjordan. I agree with the Transjordan motion. In fact, I
That
have.
will not happen.
Well, it's
Shut
under
down.
British control. I don't see why it's not a possibility to consider, especially considering the unpopularity of the other suggestions on the table. One of which is mine, which I think is actually a good idea and which I urge you to consider in some measure of detail. And this sort of bolsters Rabbi Jacobson's point about the holy places falling into the Arab sector in 100 years after the British control of it ceases. You might be able to imagine how that would be unacceptable to the Jews, and how it might create problems for people who want to go there and pray. I don't see with regarding the division of the canton and the province, there's several issues that I see with that. What are we going to do with the Arabs that, assuming we accept 30% of the land, what are we going to do with the Arabs that already live there?
Well, one second. I just hope that in 100 years we still won't have the same feud.
I agree.
I hope that this will be an independent state, so we don't have to worry about which territory it's in. I feel like we can only take it 10 years at a time.
The other thing is, if you say that we can have free travel between all areas of Palestine, no matter who you are or where you reside, whether in the province or the canton, and you also say that your most supreme priority is to have peace in the land, and we're having all these contentions about the holy places, what does that actually mean on the ground? If we're having people that can travel all around the land, Jews have their own sector, Arabs have their own sector, people can travel all around the land, you're calling for economic immigration, you're calling for educational integration and economic integration. What that actually creates in reality is a unified state. On paper, we have.
Right, but each state will administer their own internal affairs. So that would be legislative, judicial, education, as they see fit. And with regards to Arabs living within the Jewish canton, they'll have the same rights as they would have, as they would now. There will be discrimination due to ethnicity or religious affiliation.
Yeah, that's the other thing. You're demanding that we have overarching civil rights that apply to every single member of Palestinian citizenry, and you're also demanding that we have this federal national council,
Which we do not support, by the way.
which has unequal representation. I'll just finish on this point quickly. So we're sort of creating a unified government without really saying that we have a unified government. In my view, you guys are creating more barriers than doing this for yourself. If you consider my suggestion seriously and consider what the actual reality is on the ground, I think that you would realize that a binational state is actually what you're creating, but with barriers that make it more difficult to implement.
A response to that, I feel like working with the Arabs is one way to achieve a unified democracy. Wouldn't you think so? I mean, there's obviously barriers between us, but I mean, if we were to sit in the same room together, make the same decisions, I mean, that's one way we can work together. That's the first step of communicating with them.
That was the idea.
That is the idea.
Are you
And
against
I
partition?
Yes, absolutely.
I would like to respond to this idea of, eventual independence as well as the Federal National Council. To begin with, the whole reason that you're extending the mandate is because you don't see either population being capable of self-government at this moment. But I'd just like to point out a few things to you that you've actually written in your report here. If you look under your section allocation of tax revenue, you bring up the fact that you've received complaints from Zionists, having to pay for these taxes, which ultimately go to benefit Arabs. So, and
because we receive funding from our brethren abroad, you don't see the need to provide, financial assistance for the Zionists. However, don't you think if we are organized enough to receive funding from abroad that we, in a sense, are better off than the Arabs to, self-govern ourselves as of now? I mean, that's just one example of you arguing that we are not ready, but if we've been able to receive these funds from abroad, the Arabs can do the same. They have all of these Arab nations all around us, and they could just as easily ask for money from them.
Don't you think an economically strong neighbor would be beneficial to the Jewish candidate in terms of...
I agree with that, but why should we be punished for the fact that we are already organized, we've already done this? In addition to that, you mentioned that you will not help fund a government because for the Zionists, because we already have the Jewish agency. Again, another example where we've come together, we've organized ourselves, we now have a governing body, a body that could, in fact, become our government, and yet again, you are, in a sense, punishing us for having already done something that would seem, according to your standards, criteria for self-government as of now. So I really just don't understand why you are not granting us self-government and independence right now. On top of that, the Federal National Council, please explain how it makes sense to have a seat for each percentage of the population that we take up. In other words, we would have 3 seats on this council, the Arabs 7. Are you, maybe you don't actually have all of those degrees, Professor Kuhlman, because the 7 Arab seats would always overrule the 3 Zionist seats.
I'm going to stop you right here. We're going to take one issue at a time. First of all, that is going to be answered by my colleague, Lord.
They merely take recommendations, so they don't actually make policy.
And first of all, with regards to the tax and the funding you receive, just because you receive funding doesn't mean that you're capable of governing yourselves. The Jewish agency, yes, you have it, but we still do not believe it capable of complete autonomy.
Even though we paid off 80% of the Ottoman debt, and also the majority of our funding
Again,
actually
that's
goes into public
finance.
works.
Just because you are financially competent
The majority of
does
our
not mean
taxes go into
competent
99% of the Arab education through
control
the government.
yourself in an
Frank
international...
do not talk over my colleague.
Yes, I'm a commissioner here.
I'm offended.
Well, I am offended
I'm
too.
offended.
I'm offended.
Yeah, well, I'm an emotional person. I'm not quite sure what
We can
you're
have a
saying
cry
here.
fest.
Okay.
I can't do that.
Okay, so
Okay, Mr.
just,
Jabotinsky, please hold
I
your
would
comments.
like, I
Please
would
hold
like
your
a full
comments.
response.
just because you are financially capable of handling yourselves does not mean that we believe that you are capable of political and international independence. We are still the mandate authorities here, and what we decide is more or less law. And we have decided that you are not capable, and you must accept that because we are in control.
But 7 Arab recommendations compared to 3 is Jewish recommendations.
We're
It's
not
still
There will
talking
be
about
no
that.
recommendation because there will be no council. We're not
I would
accepting.
like to add, would not be an issue if you take on my suggestion.
Okay, we'd like to move to some comments coming from
Yes,
the
we'd like to hear
Mr.
from you.
Neshishibi, you had...
Someone said it.
Oh, okay.
Mr.
Here's your hand up for...
Okay, yeah, so I don't think that we have enough civil rights. I think you're withholding a lot of them from us, from both the Arabs and the
Such
Jews.
as...
Well, for one thing, I could add to them that the rumor that's been going on in the Jewish newspaper.
How do you,
But you
you're
have-
interrupting,
Wait,
determine
Mr.
who
Madden,
need to
is
focus.
governed?
Focus.
You've been flirting with young
we
women.
were moving from the room.
With the Arabs.
They were our
Please.
nieces.
Hey, listen, everyone has their things, but that's just messed up.
Okay, please, Zion.
Seriously.
Mr. Madden, please. Thank
So
you.
basically, Mr. Zaitun and myself are going to start influencing the Fellahin to boycott paying your taxes and also boycott your joint British-Arab task force.
Subverting His Majesty's government.
So even though we're trying to alleviate your tax problems by...
We want
You're gonna
smaller
boycott
taxes. I want the British government to enforce legitimate voting so that there's no fraud at the polls.
But you realize by boycotting this, you're not opening up to any debate, and therefore if we can't have
I
a
tried opening
dialogue
debate
with
last Appeal Commission and then
So are you advocating a boycott in a non-violent fashion, or are you
absolutely
advocating...
no violence.
But what
Civil
about...
disobedience completely.
which historically in these situations has turned violent.
I feel like you were making an allusion to some of the violence in the current situation. But do you think that basically riling up to Fellaini will only lead to violence?
And you're
I don't
aligning
want
yourself
to
with a
rile-
violent
I don't
person.
want
As
to
we've
rile
seen
anyone
that-
up. I'm not going to tell anyone to get riled up. I'm going to tell them to boycott. Just don't go. Don't pay.
Abu Zaitoun is a very violent individual, and you're aligning yourself with him. And yet you're claiming not to promote
Abu Zaitoun
violence?
is also a very big representative of Fellaini.
Then why can't he do it without
I need to
violence?
worry
Why
about-
must he resort to violence?
Because these fellaheen have been wronged
By
ever
their own
since,
people.
not by their own people, ever since
By their own people.
Herbert Samuel took power in 1920, and Mr. Abdel Hadi actually pointed this out in his 1930 memo on the Passive White Paper. Ever since he took power in 1920, what had happened was that he prevented exports of olive oil and cereals. So fellaheen were producing things that could not be exported out of the country. A flood in the markets,
It's true.
huge rise in supply, and a price drop. And all of a sudden they can no longer afford anything, so they have to sell their land to Jewish conquestors. How does that seem right? That's all because of one man banning exports. That's one action he
Okay,
took.
so the fellaheen are angry. But basically, I'm going to enforce this boycott. I'm going to try and influence all of my supporters to boycott all of the British goods and your task force, and
What are you demanding?
I'm demanding freedom of press completely.
I agree with him.
I'm demanding easier taxes for everyone in the entirety of Palestine.
Was
I
that
need
not
to see-
suggested in the report?
But
Yes,
like,
it
I
was.
want to see it happen. Like,
Well,
things
but
are
so there's
always
nothing has to
suggested.
be supported
Yeah,
for
so,
it to happen.
yeah, you can't just boycott it and say it's not happening. It was just released
Your
2 days
colleagues,
ago, you have to give it
your
a
colleagues,
chance.
especially the Mufti, are basically saying they don't support many of the,
We can't support
central
partition.
recommendations which the rest of the report is based upon.
We cannot support a
Okay, so
partition.
then
Do you
this is
understand why we
outside
cannot
of the
support a
convention,
partition?
like, the way things
Was that clear?
I've heard your
No,
position.
but why? Why we cannot support a partition?
Why can't you?
Because we have owned this land for the last 1,300 years, and in the last 3 decades,
Right.
Jews have come in and all of a sudden claimed ownership to it, and because
But it
of
was all legal though.
it was
legal.
who cares if it's legal? It's
Legal.
completely unethical. The fact that he could ban exports and all of a sudden the flood in the markets leads to a
Times are
drop in
changing,
price.
okay?
Times are changing because of one
We will have you
man who
That's
made
the
a
Ottomans'
stupid
fault. That's
decision.
not our fault.
We will
We're
have.
trying-
We will
It's
have
not
you
your fault, but
removed.
he was part of your scheme. He was a Zionist as well.
We will have you removed. Yes,
We will.
Mr. Rollinson.
I think something else we should discuss, maybe to take a rest from the whole immigration lands stuff, holy places, is the fact that in 10 years, we understand that you, the British, will be reviewing our cases and deciding if we are ready for autonomy, but I think a lot of us would have a problem with that, as you, the British, only deciding that whether or not we should have autonomy, because we're the people who are going to be leading. I don't believe it's the British to decide, and it might just be in British, interest to not give us autonomy.
We will not accept this. The Commission has no right to vote to
Mr. Abuzatun, you know
divide our country.
you are under arrest
Incarcerated.
for crimes against His Majesty's government, and
Your presence
You
here
have no
will-
right.
Please
We will
arrest him.
fight. We
He
will
wants to talk
fight.
to himself.
We will fight for
please,
generations.
constable, please arrest this man.
You will regret.
He's not allowed to be in the commission's proceedings. You may beat him when
Bye.
he's outside the room.
He may not be here, but the sentiment still exists. You can't arrest one man. You can't arrest one man. He's representative of the entire Philippine population. If you arrest him, then everyone else is going to feel the same way. You arresting him is not going to change anything. And I seriously recommend that you consider where we're coming from here, because the Fellahin are not just fighting to fight; they're fighting for their existence. Do you
Do
understand?
you not see that we're trying to help the
But
Fellahin out?
helping the
Have you not read all
Fellahin,
the
helping the
things
Fellahin
that
by
you're
giving
trying
their
to do?
land away and allowing more and more Jews to come in and
We are-
threaten their
we are
existence
halting
further.
land sales
That's not
now.
helping. That's making them scared for their lives. That's why they're fighting.
We are halting land sales. You can halt land sales in the Arab province.
But you're still giving away an entire portion of the land that we've worked to cultivate over the last 1,300 years.
Right, but a large portion of that population is Jewish.
So let them stay there, but don't give it away. That's what we can't allow that to happen. That's why we can't accept partition.
And what about
Excuse me, Mr. Alamy, you were saying something before you were interrupted?
I was saying that it's unfair that the British should decide whether or not we should be autonomous. It should not be up to you, sorry to say it,
There will be input from,
but I
both
feel
representatives from both
that
sides.
many of us here would agree that input isn't good enough. We feel that in 10 years we will be ready for autonomy, and it may not be in the British best interests to give that autonomy to us. So people are very mistrusting of you and don't think that we don't think that that's the best idea.
I want to make the argument that it is in the British best interest to give the Arabs autonomy because, as we've demonstrated up until this point, we've maintained a positive relationship with His Majesty's government. I consider myself number one as the primary political religious leader of the Palestinian Arabs, but number two as an officer of His Majesty's government. We can have a positive economic and political relationship if you will allow us. However, if you continue to support the Zionist cause, it's very difficult for us to align ourselves with you because you're threatening our existence just by allowing them to come into our land and effectively take it away from us. Even if it is a 30% slice of it, that's still too much for us, and we can't allow it to happen.
Okay.
Well, the Mufti's, okay.
I disagree with my colleague that the issue of land and immigration isn't important. That's at the heart of the issue, as you said in your Keel report. Who's living on the land, whose land it is, it's very important. It's an issue. As I mentioned earlier in my testimony, these quote-unquote legal land sales are in fact illegal. As I've thoroughly explained in my testimony, that the Fahaleem were taken advantage of because of their inability to be able to export their goods, their
Wasn't under Ottoman rule that many of these problems, the roots of these
No, it was
problems
under
were
Herbert
created?
Samuel as the High Commissioner
Yes.
for
The
Palestine.
indebtedness began under.
But the debt is not what we're talking about.
Further pushed by
Countries,
Arabs.
communities can have debt. That's not the issue. The issue is that when they can no longer export the only good that they sell, the markets domestically become flooded, prices drop, and they can't afford anything. So when a Jewish buyer, who's the only buyer, by the way, and that's part of the scheme as well, comes in and says, we'll pay you this low price because that's the only thing that you can afford to do with your entire livelihood, they have to say yes. And meanwhile,
What about absentee landowners?
The absentee landowners are a peripheral issue. What we're talking about right now is the Fellaheen unable to buy or sell anything. So they're effectively the only move they can make is to sell their land. You
It
understand?
wasn't a peripheral issue.
It is a
It's because of those land sales that we got majority of the land that we have right now.
No, it's because
they
because
work on the
Fellaheen were
land.
unable to export their goods.
So why do they care about the
Excuse me,
Fellaheen?
hasn't the boycott disproportionately hurt the Fellaheen currently?
I mean,
As they boycotted.
right now, if
Zionists,
a boycott is their alternative to violence right now, I think you should be happy. Honestly, it's not okay that what's happening right now, and they're trying to do something about it.
Don't you think the presence of a Jewish canton would be beneficial to the Arab Fellaheen?
Absolutely not, because this is our land. We're not willing to see it just be handed over to conquestors who just walked right in the last 30 years.
If I can respond to that question
Sure.
as well. I agree with Mufti that by seeking to solve the problems the
Actually,
Fellaheen...
could you please introduce yourself for the
Yes,
for the
my name
press?
is Jamal Al-Husseini. So you're seeking to solve the problems that the Fellaheen are facing because of these illegal land deals by giving away parts of their land to people that don't belong in our country. I understand that Jews are...
But they don't belong, but Jews have had a presence in Palestine for...
Yes, Jews have lived peacefully under an Arab majority and within Palestine that belongs to Arabs. Recently, as the Mufti said in the last 30 years, there's been an influx of European Jews coming in to strip land away from our people, especially the disadvantaged Fellaheen. So you're saying that you're trying to solve this issue by taking away their land, even if it's a little bit, that creates an even more desperation with the Fellaheen. They're already homeless, they're already facing financial problems, and their land are being stripped away and saying, well, this is the best solution. This is what's best for you. How is it best for you, someone to enter into your home, say this land actually belongs to me, create policies that allow them to quote-unquote legally strip your land away and say, well, we're going to stay here, it no longer belongs to you. This is going to create a situation for violence.
That's why we're setting up the Arab province where internal issues can be decided by an Arab majority, especially with
But
regards to
Palestine
land sales,
belongs to
immigration.
the Arabs.
The whole of Palestine belongs to the Arabs. That's what Jamal
It has for generations.
It belongs to the Arabs. We are more than welcome with having a limited number of Jews living under an Arab majority, under an Arab leadership.
30% of the population is Jewish.
We want to put a stop to it growing further than that.
Right.
We are capable of dealing with the 30% Jewish population as it is.
Yes.
It might be significantly larger than it has been in the past, but we've been able to do it, and we will be able to do it. And that's why I say that it will be mutually beneficial to us and to His Majesty's government to allow us to do it. We will figure out a way to do it under your tutelage.
And I would like to respond to Mr. Jabotinsky's response that is about saving people's lives and what's going on with Jews abroad. Yes, it is. This issue is about saving people's lives. It's about saving the lives of the Fahim. You know, they're being taken advantage of. They're being stripped of their land, of their heritage, because other people are facing other issues. That this issue is becoming, well, it's about the Jews and what they're facing, but what about the Fahim? We have yet to discuss how their livelihood, their heritage are being stripped away. It's not about Jews versus Fahim, it's about the lives of people, it's about the lives of our people. And as Arab leadership and an Arab majority, we're concerned with saving our people first and foremost because this is their land, this is where they've lived for thousands of years, before and after the Jews are having any issues. That's what's the most important issue, saving the lives of our people, and not having that being put second place for any other lives.
Well, the lives of your Arabs aren't at stake.
Yeah, we've been treating
No
it in our
one's being threatened
hospitals.
of anything.
They're completely at stake. Do you understand the cause, the reason why you're here, commissioners, the cause of the 1929 Wailing Wall disturbances
Yes.
was completely because of Jewish encroachment upon Haram al-Sharif. That's the only reason why. And when you look at what the Jews did, it might not have been permanent alterations to it, but just by bringing in chairs, partitions, light fixtures, just by making their presence felt here, the Arabs of our region fear for their existence. That is why they're here, and that is what you need to put a stop to. You need to permanently say that this is not okay, and that the existence of the Palestinian Arabs is safe, and you need to protect that existence. And that's,
Well, that existence
Don't you
is
think His Majesty's
70%.
governments can protect that existence?
we don't think the way it's going right now, we don't think so. The first report that you gave us, you conceded way too much to the Zionists, and instead of really addressing why you're here, which is the cause of the disturbances 7 years ago, instead what you're aiming to do is just give the Jews something that's going to make Arabs only angrier. And that's not addressing the cause of the problem. That's only exacerbating it.
You're a goddamn liar, that's what you are. You're a freaking liar, alright? First and foremost, let me tell you something.
Mr. Van-Gurion, please.
What? I'm gonna express myself, alright? I'm gonna express myself. No!
Yes.
No more gabbling. No more gabbling. No more gabbling. No more gabbling.
People, you're going to put Arabs
please.
underneath?
I'm passionate man. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, okay?
We're not allowed to respond to the
Please,
threats.
Mr.
It's not
Van-Gurion,
right, alright?
Decorum.
This guy's been talking all day, alright? Let someone else have a chance to talk.
please,
Oh my god.
please,
Alright.
Mr. Van-Gurion, go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, alright, we're not treating the Fellaheen bad at all, okay? They come to our hospitals. 70% of all the Arabs that live in Hebron today, based on the 1928 consensus, were treated by the Jews without any sort of discrimination, okay? That's more than what you can say about your own fellow Palestinians. This is true, and this is a fact, and it's real. Second of all, 30% of the land for us is absolutely fine. We are 30% right now, but quite frankly, we want unlimited immigration, okay? You're surrounded by Arabs. This term Palestinian, this term Lebanese, Syrian, this is all a brand new term for you guys. You were under the Ottomans for a very long time. You were seen as an Ottoman. This idea of you being a Palestinian, saying you have ties to land, you were pretty much conquered for 1,300 years as a
Did we not
people.
live here?
Huh?
Did we not live here?
Please, Mr. Van-Gurion, talk to the commissioners, not at specific. I think it'll create increased tension.
I don't like you.
I just want to say that the Mufti does not represent all of our beliefs.
Oh, yes, I do.
No, I agree.
As Salami, 100% say that our beliefs are not. He does not represent all of our beliefs. There are people in Arab Palestinians who would very much like to continue living side by side with the Jews.
Exactly.
And if this
Mr.
is how it's
Alami
going
is
to happen,
absolutely
that's
right about this, and so is Mr. Al-Hadi in regards to freedom of the press, in regards to civil rights. We will give that to the Palestinians, but in regards to certain people within the Palestinian
Give that to
territory,
the Palestinians. This is our land. How can you give us something?
Please,
we can
please,
give you
do
something.
not interrupt.
not towards the Fellaheen. When you kicked out, when you sold the land, you didn't bother to industrialize your own people.
Do not interrupt.
Because of us, we're the ones who created the industrialization within the land of Palestine today. Any sort of factories, from the textiles to ceramics to hospitals to educations, 99% of which come from the government, which we pay for your education, for your children's educations, come from us. We make up 20% of the people as of right now, but yet we are taxed 40 to 45% compared to everyone else.
As you said, all of a sudden.
Can I just ask you to go sit on that side of the table? Continue to
We were just
Musa Alami is a traitor. Musa Alami is a traitor.
No, he is not.
We were just under
passionate person.
Ottoman rule. We haven't had a chance to make our own schools, factories,
Exactly.
institutions.
And
You need to give us a chance. We are just, like you just said, we're not incapable of doing that. We'll do that on our
But we're
own
saying
rights.
when
But
we're
now
doing it, we're
we just
doing
don't
it
have
for
the
everybody,
resources
though.
because now we're ruled by somebody else and they're not giving us the necessary resources for
Let's
it.
continue with constructive criticism, not
We blame you.
factional argument.
I do have a response from Mr. Ben-Gurion. If you're doing it for everyone, why do you advocate Hebrew labor? That is not for the benefit
If we're
of everybody.
asking for the Jews to come to Palestine today, okay, compared to what they're living in the conditions of Europe, we have to make sure there's not a refugee crisis. Okay, by them coming here, we are taking care of our flock.
But there is
All
an
right.
internal refugee crisis.
But that is not my fault. It sounds bad, but it's not our fault. Why isn't the
Then you're
Palestinians
not
doing
doing
the
it for the
great?
good of
We are
everybody.
doing it good for the people because we're increasing industrialization
You're doing
within
it
the
for the good of
Palestinian
But that doesn't mean
sector.
it's
There's a
helping us.
distinction there.
Please, one at a
We're
time.
You're
increasing
trying to
industrialization.
switch the good of
They didn't
the
have that
people
before. They're living in a
everywhere.
feudal society because of us. At least they're
Our
at least
society
sitting
is
on the
just
table.
fine, for your
At least
information.
Mr.
Our
Zaitun
society
can say
is
he can
just
kill
fine.
you now.
Society is just fine, then
Please.
why don't you
Our
establish
society
it?
is just fine. It's been working for 1,300 years and we don't need to change it now.
If you have a problem with it, stop stealing land.
Please.
We're not stealing land, okay?
Mr.
We're
Ben-Gurion.
buying it legally. If you say we're stealing it, that's because they took your land
Mr.
by
Nashibi,
force.
please speak.
No, just on the issue of Hebrew labor, I know in your commission you advocated for like integrating the workforce, but you don't outlaw Hebrew labor, and
It does say there that if it is not implemented
Right.
as a program, it will be outlawed.
right, which I would just think, why would you not just outlaw it initially?
Because we're not trying to create laws here, we're trying to create good working relationships. And just by creating a law that outlaws it will alienate people.
But even within our own territory, though?
Yes,
Even in their own
if needs
territory.
be. There are Arabs
Right.
living in your territory.
But if there's,
But we're not treating them bad, though.
Let's make it clear again. This
No,
is
yeah,
our territory.
so
You're taking it away from us.
So I actually have a proposal for the Arabs in our canton. There will be a professional development program that would also help the Arabs, so that they're not falling out of our economy. I mean, our interest of our canton is to develop it economically, so we're not going to let Arabs struggle economically either. So it'd be in our best interest to help, regardless if you're an Arab or a Jew.
so
It's going to take time, though, but
Right.
you have to allow us to have the Hebrew labor as of right now so that we can have the Jews who are currently here right now be able to work. You can't just ask a person to come out of the street randomly, take a scalpel here, cut this person's appendix. We have doctors already coming in here taking care of those who are less fortunate.
Alright, what if this land was our appendix and you're taking a scalpel to it and taking out the most important part? That's what I'm saying.
The appendix is
We
worthless.
will also have Arab
Again, alright?
Do we know
This
what
land is our heart.
No
This
one
land
needs
is
it.
our heart.
Gentlemen.
And you're taking a scalpel to our land and you're cutting it up however you see fit.
Mr. Nashibi, please finish your.
I was just, so with your program, while Ben-Gurion,
Do not interrupt him.
while Ben-Gurion,
I have the right to speak,
Hebrew
by the
labor
way.
would
In
continue
turn.
for a small period of time, you're advocating for a program that would then train the Arabs within your canton.
Exactly.
And then there would be and with that there would be an integration.
Integrate labor force.
But it's going to have to take time.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
not giving us that.
And then,
That's nice.
Al-Ghazali also had an issue of education. Of course, like, education is fundamental of developing
Which
a
we're
new state.
funding the majority
Mr.
of lives.
Ben-Gurion,
Which-
please.
Which though it is being
He's
my
funded,
best friend.
that is...
We are listening
talk
one
about the
person at a time, not
financial aspects
two.
at the same time. Alright, so we can have both programs. We can have Jewish schools and Arab schools as well, or Muslim schools, however you would like it. But we want to educate everyone in the population. So, like I was saying before, like, we want success in our canton. So education will be enforced for the Jews and the Arabs.
But I guess you'll have two different curriculums. I'm going to go ahead and
Yes,
assume that your
there'll be a
curriculum for
base-
the Jews will include a pro-Zionist outlook on.
No. So we'll have primary schools and that'd be standard, and then you have your additional religious schools, which would be taught
Based on
separately,
whatever you wish to teach.
which could be held on weekends or evenings.
By
But
not
we
counting
have
anything
a
else.
standard primary program.
I would like to go back to the issue of Jewish immigration. Like, these are all, side issues. If you're not dealing with the population, and the issue of who's coming in and who's not coming in, then it's really not important. You're saying that you're going to have a maximum of 40,000 Jewish immigration each year.
And
Gentlemen.
I would like to, okay, so let's say we are going ahead with the
fuel report Jewish Arab canton, right? And the Jewish canton has only 30% of the land for its entirety of the mandate and afterwards, right? And you have this influx of Jewish immigration. That is going to ultimately lead to a population problem. There's not going to be not enough land for too many people and too many Jewish immigration. My problem is what's going to happen next. Jewish and Zionist forces are going to try to find more land for their people.
They won't have any armies. How would they find?
They have armies. They have armies.
They have armies.
We
standing
We don't have armies.
we are not allowed armies.
As
We're
I'm
gonna
gonna
stay
say, and
with
if
the
you've
report.
actually read the report, then you would see that unfortunately we
Oh,
do
I
not
actually
have
read
a
the
militia.
report.
We have our own local.
Do you deny the existence of a youth group, a militant youth group that you yourself created, Beitar? Do you deny the existence of that?
What's wrong with having
That's
a youth group?
effectively a militia. It's a militant youth group. That's a militia. What else are you looking
If a
for?
man, if a group of
This
men
is the
come
beginning.
together and
We
have
have to be able to
conversations, that's not
defend
militia.
If you don't expel the
And
Jews,
they
then
have
this
to be
will
able to
continue
defend
to happen.
themselves against what, may I ask?
Well,
Against
I'm
your
sorry.
people.
I'm an Arab, and I seem to have been attacked by other Arabs. So it's everyone's.
How do you know you've been
Your
attacked
own
by other
people
Arabs?
have
You
been
mentioned
She's
attacked
not an Arab being attacked by others. She's a traitor
From
being
the
attacked by
Jewish
people.
She's
side.
not a traitor,
She
okay?
is a
She
traitor.
is not a traitor. He is not a traitor.
Ned, please.
All right, well,
I'm
thank you.
pragmatic.
Yes,
If I
right.
may finish.
No one can finish.
My question and my issue is that this will lead to a political and a militant crisis between Jews and Arabs. This population influx of Jewish immigration will lead to a crisis that will result in a war
I like to make
in
a
Palestine.
rebuttal. We Jews have been living in ghettos for a very
Constable-
long time. We can live in tight spaces, okay? So don't worry about that.
Constable,
All
please
right.
remove Mr. Ben Gurion for 10 minutes.
Oh, so it's like that?
Let him cool
So it's
off.
like that? Alright, I'm gonna leave, right? I'm gonna head up with your girl, your niece, and I'm gonna give her 10 inches of my commandment. I'll tell you that right now.
They were.
Yeah, that's right. That's you right there. That's you. I don't need this. I don't need this.
You consistently,
Take a time
if you
out.
consistently speak
I'm
out
gonna
of
spit it
turn,
like a
you
drill.
will
That's what I'm gonna do.
If you consistently speak out of turn, you will be removed.
This land belongs to Arabs. This belongs to Palestinians. While we understand that there are international problems, it is not our place or our problem to deal with international problems. We have internal problems facing our people as Arabs that we need to address. And giving away land for non-Palestinians, non-Arabs, it's not the issue and it's not the correct way to address our internal problems. Maybe once we establish and fix all these internal problems, we can help our international problems. But as of right now, it's in our best interest to
How would
focus
you
internationally.
fix these internal problems?
By having limited and non-existent immigration, there are
But-
more than enough
Well, you can
Jews in
take
our
care of
country.
that within your
But
country.
have Arabs not lived in this land for, as the movie said, for many years,
Yes.
and they still have many of the same problems?
Well, if we're having
Don't you think that they need His Majesty's
European,
government to
if
stand
we're
on its
having
own?
European
And we'll
penetration
have His
and
Majesty-
Jewish and Zionist
No.
problems interrupting our ability to rule our country, then of course we haven't developed as well as others because we're having to constantly battle
I feel
against
like-
Why are you
other
taking it
issues.
upon
Please,
yourself to actually
Mr.
do
Jabotinsky.
something?
We will have you removed as well. The Jewish representation will be severely.
That might be better for everyone.
We should just remove all the people that want to have violence and have all the people that want to sort things out. So
Well, that would take care of Mr. Jabotinsky.
I don't think anyone is advocating violence.
Yes, I strongly disagree. I believe that on either side having an army, any sort of militia is not the right answer. It should not be used. These should be defensive forces, not offensive. We're not. Violence is never the answer. People should be using their words. We're all adults here. We don't need to use our fists to show that we're more powerful than somebody else. I think that it's a very cowardly thing to do, to come up behind somebody and attack them, stab them in the back. Just saying.
I'm
From
sure that's
personal
your Jewish
experience.
friends.
What?
I'm sure that's your Jewish friends.
I share it with anybody who respects my opinion and, won't go and attack me and try to kill me in the middle of the night. I consider that a friend, and whether that be a Jew or an Arab, I don't care.
Exactly.
I've
because-
lived next to Jews my entire life. I've lived next to Arabs my entire life. I've lived in Britain for a portion of my life. I see everyone to me as a friend who will respect me and will listen to me. I don't see you know, violence to me is not my friend, and whoever, you know, holds that gun or sword or whatever they use, they are not a friend to me.
The issue isn't Jews, right? Jews has lived in this land under Palestinian and Arab leadership for years. We're fine with Jews. We have a problem with Zionists seeking to take advantage of the Fahaleen, seeking to take advantage of just internal struggles that every nation has post the Great War. And that's our problem, Zionists, not Jews.
Well, you don't discriminate. So
No, there's a huge difference between Zionists and Jews.
I
believe
agree.
members of
I
the-
represent many Jews who are not Zionists.
Zionism is a way of life.
But a lot of the times in riots and attacks, there has been no consideration between Zionists and Jews because many of my community have been attacked, and they're not part of Zionism.
So blame
They're
the
just
Zionists,
peacefully
not
in
us.
Jerusalem.
Blame the
Yes.
Zionists.
Yes.
Their presence is what causes the attack.
How can you blame Zionists for your
Because they're
people?
taking our land and they've displaced our fellaheen. And how are we expected to stand
Maybe
by
you
while
should
this
give my
happens?
colleague a
So that
chance.
you
Gentlemen.
can never justify violence like that.
So, taking away the presence of Zionists, there is no need for violence. People aren't being pushed off their land, people aren't being desperate, and before the issue of Zionist rise in Palestine, there wasn't any need for violence. Jews and Arabs lived peacefully, side by side.
There was a Jewish community here, but there was a very small one, and it was in Jerusalem.
And that was okay
now-
with us.
Yes.
So, but what
The
about
size
all
of the
other
Jewish
holy sites that
community
we
is not
wanna
the issue.
be
The issue
involved
is
in?
that the
The
goal
size
of
of the problem, so
Zionism.
then
What's the problem?
unlimited.
Unlimited
Objection.
immigration. Unlimited immigration should be allowed.
The issue is that the goal of Zionism, even as stated by Dr. Wiseman, is to create an overwhelming Jewish majority in Palestine.
That is not the case.
That is obviously the
That
case.
is
That's
obviously
essentially
the
not
case.
your
Gentlemen.
That is
So
not
so
the case.
eventually we would like a majority Jewish state, but I mean,
There you
but
Within our
the thing
territory.
is that we want to accept the Arab as well. We're not trying to cause tension or friction between among any of us. I believe that we have our own respective cantons. Why not cultivate that land first? I mean, no one's taking anything else no one's taking anything from you. You know what so what I'm saying is that yeah, Zionism is a different approach, but obviously realistically we can't achieve that right now.
It's not true. If your idea is you're not taking anything from us, then why did you say that you want to make Palestine as Jewish as the UK is British?
Exactly. So
That's
that's
changing the culture of a land. That would be completely
well, the
obliterating
culture.
what existed.
Well,
It's about
culture
expressing
is
our
actually
faith.
Jewish.
That's what's the whole entire purpose of that code, is to express our faith
This shouldn't
openly
have
without any
anything
sort
to
of
do with
fear.
faith.
It does. It's our culture. It's our
Well,
culture.
then it's faith, so talk to Mr. Mufti.
Mufti.
The Jews are here. This is a fact. They're not going to go anywhere. You must work with them.
All right, I already said this. We're not expected
you.
to pick out the 30% of Jews in this land. Just
Right.
stop letting them come in any further.
They're
But you think
in
it's un-
that province. What's wrong with making that their
Because
province?
that's our province.
But they're
We are not
majority
okay
there.
with this. We
They
are not
there.
okay with this. We
The
will not
problem
accept
is,
partition.
You've already divided up the Arab lands that you promised us, which is supposed to be from Saudi Arabia to Palestine and Egypt. You've already divided up into 8 different pieces, and now you're trying to divide it again. This is your policy. It's not acceptable. We don't want it. We don't want you here.
But don't you
But
think
we are
it's
here
unfair?
and
You'd probably
we are the
cooperate with the Jews a lot better if you weren't here.
So,
You give them that
I
candidate
get
today, and
that.
10 years from now, when there are 400,000 more of them, see what happens. With
Compared to the 1.5 million of you guys,
There are, if
375,000. 375,000.
You've already been ejected. Why is he back here?
Your 10 minutes isn't up.
what is the
Mr.
natural
Ben-Gurion, as a
what is the
prominent representative of the Zionists, needs to be present.
Exactly, thank you. Mr. Peel. Your niece was
Lord,
lying.
Lord,
Lord
So
Peel.
what is the natural
Yeah, my
line of
lord.
thought
Lord move you again.
if the Mufti and Mr. Adi Hadi don't want partitions? Can we just follow that line of thought to its natural end?
Okay.
There's no partition, right?
I
And
think it would
so
be...
there's one
Allow
state.
Dr. Mack.
And the other fact is that Jews are already here, and Jews will continue to come, right? So now we just have to figure out a way to work within those boundaries.
And we want to work together, right? So what is your proposal? I know you guys have lots of complaints, but what do you suggest?
I
We
think
want to make this happen.
completely independent from the British with respect to your military and oil
which will happen. It's not like magic.
I'm not gonna touch those.
When
But
the war will
completely independent from the British in a democratically elected government,
Right.
like a parliamentary type
Independent from the
government.
British now, or
Oh yeah, right now, like
I mean, it would have to end now.
yeah, like within a year. That'd be
Do you
nice.
think
What
that,
if we
do you
change
think we're
that
ready
to
to,
If
5
this were to
years?
do
happen,
you think
I
the
mean,
Arabs are
you
ready
have
to
to
stand on
unpack
their
the
own
direction.
after just 1 year?
Without the presence of Zionism, we would be ready to stand our own. I
How would you be ready to stand on your own? We
Let me
established
finish.
the
Without the
Jewish
presence of
agency.
Zionists, we would be ready to stand on our own. I'm
Funds
speaking to the
abroad.
commission.
Wait, no, back to Dr. Magnus.
Without Zionism, we would
Gentlemen.
be able to stand on our own because our economy has been thrown into turmoil with this rapid influx of Zionist land grabbers. It's impossible for us to stand on our own right now. In the future, I'm advocating for an independent Arab state. But right now, we need you guys. We need the British right now, and I'm prepared to admit that. But right now, the main thing that the commission has to address is the cause of the 1929 disturbances. So you need to preserve the status quo of the holy
And
places.
the current violence.
Stop. What?
And the current violence.
Yeah, the current violence is the direct cause of the disturbances. I'm saying right now, if you preserve the status quo of the holy places as it's been for the last 1,300 years, stop Zionist immigration in its tracks, and cease all land sales, and promise the future Palestinian state, there will be no violence, and you'll have achieved your end for His Majesty's government. That's all I have to say.
Concerning that, we cannot retract the Balfour Declaration.
We don't
That's a
expect
fact.
you to. They have.
implied that we retract by
No, I
saying
didn't say.
that
I never said anything about the Balfour Declaration.
But this is implied. This is
Well,
inherently
let me.
implied.
Let me.
Clarify?
Clarify.
Yes,
Sorry.
please.
Okay. I will clarify. The Jewish national home does not need to be a canton of land which is stolen from the Arabs. Okay. If the Jews want to live here, they can live here. But we cannot allow them to continue to come in at the pace that they have, throwing off our economy because that's threatening our existence. And in addition to the things that they've done to our holy places which have caused the violence, which is what you're here to do essentially, we're not asking you to retract the Balfour Declaration. We're just asking you to address why there's violence. And in order to do that, you need to do the things that I said. Those 3 things. And then we'll
Thank
be
you.
okay.
Thank you, Mufti. Dr. Magnus, did you have any?
I wanted to, if the problem is Jewish immigration, my corollary suggestion is again, British expansion into the surrounding areas of Transjordan,
For me, the
Lebanon.
problem.
What lets
Sorry,
you-
Yeah,
That will not
Yeah.
occur.
For me, the problem isn't as much Jewish immigration. The problem is the concept of Zionism. Like, I disagree with Zionism for the same reason I disagree with the British dividing up Palestine. It's just cutting up land that should be unified.
I think it should be unified as well.
So,
And I
like-
think that we would work really
It should
well
be unified,
together.
but
because
right now,
the
we're
Jews
not
are bringing
prepared for
a
that.
lot of
Zionism
In light of the current violence.
Yeah, Zionism isn't
It's not cutting
cutting
up the land. All it is
Let's
doing
take a
is
quick
making
vote
it
here.
That's true.
Yeah.
If they had their way, then they would just be all the land. It wouldn't be cutting it
In
up.
light of the
If they had
current
their way.
violence,
let's-
I think both sides are able to peacefully work with each other.
Let's take a quick vote. Who is for a unified Palestine and no partition? Raise your hand. So that's
Well,
one,
a
two,
unified meaning.
meaning democratically unified.
Under what type of leadership?
Well, let's just say not for partition. Who is not for partition here? 2, 3, 4. Okay. And so the rest, I assume, are for partition. Raise your hand.
Well, in the short term, I want partition. Long term, I want a unified nation.
So a unified, all under like Jewish canton and Palestine or Arab province one.
Yes, after the mandate.
But
That's
you
what
would
I
like that under Jewish control.
Yes.
Yes.
See, this is where
Who's
the
for
problem.
living in the
Unified,
real world
unified will
where-
not be.
Palestine is actually
How would
already-
representation work? How
Yes.
would it work?
Arab.
Under my colleague's idea of a unified nation, this is an Arab majority in which Jewish immigration could be restricted.
Well, I feel like it could be separated. I mean, by vote, it doesn't matter if it's Jewish or Arab. Like, eventually, it'd be whoever. It could be Christian if you wanted to, as long as they're voted in the proper way. I think the long term, that's our end goal. Right now, the only reason we're in cantons is because so we can manage ourselves, which we can't do. They can't even manage their own people. We can't either. So I think
We're
that
trying though.
Well, yeah,
We're
definitely trying.
We
Lots
can't manage our own
of
people
progress.
when we have the presence of Zionism that's throwing our economy to shambles. We can't do that.
well, that's not.
Well,
problem,
the
but
bottom
we're
line is that
trying
you
to
have
help
it.
them.
Your intent has no place here. It's the facts on the
That's
ground.
why-
What they're
okay,
going
one
to
second.
say.
Please, please.
But that's why the tax allocating, I don't have a problem with it. I understand that your economy is struggling, but eventually I would like for us all to be together. So that's why with this tax allocating to assist your economy, that's good, because eventually we'll be one big economy together, which is fine. Like, I understand that you're losing land and we're gaining land, but it is in our best interest to cultivate it and build it
And it's in
the
your
way
best
we should.
interest too.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No,
I
it's
have a
not.
question for the
I'm
Mufti.
telling you the interest of the Palestinian people. It is not in our interest to give away any land.
You're
That's
speaking for your own
the bottom
interest.
line.
That's
No,
not-
I'm not.
Your own
I'm speaking
interest.
for the thousands of Fellaheen that no longer have
You got
land.
3 Arabs who disagree with you on that.
We'll
I'm
have
speaking for the entire
Three
entirety of the Arab
Arabs.
population.
You're a liar.
You're-
You're not
Musa Alami is a
You're a
Zionist.
liar.
He's
I'm
not
a
a Zionist, he's a
traitor to the
passionate
Arab people.
Palestinian who
Constable,
disagrees with you.
Constable, please approve the mufti for the rest of the session.
Call the Prof.
The appeal commission will do nothing.
You can
We
have
will
10
fight. We
minutes.
will fight. We will fight.
Let's ask him a question.
The Mufti
Violence.
He just promoted violence.
Arab promoted violence. Did you hear it?
Not the Arabs, that
Mufti promoted violence.
The Mufti has considerable influence over his people. He is a key player who we need to cooperate with us. We
He
can't
just
just-
promoted violence.
You promote the creation of a
Please,
of a
please.
Jewish
To
militant
defend
group. How did-
ourselves.
but
How can we?
Where's the line
between
between
You need
defense
to
and
defend
defension?
means.
Stop! Professor Copeland, please speak.
I'm concerned about your group of militant military Jewish soldiers because I'm not sure where the line is drawn between defense and premeditated defense.
What about the
Can I
idea of
ask
them
her real-
absorbing
hold on,
Asian
hold on.
armed
When
forces?
she's done, I ask her when he's done,
Yes.
I ask her.
Lashes are coming. Lashes are coming.
So and you know, like I said, if there was violence meditated by the Arabs, I am open to discussions of creation of this group that you advocate, this iron wall. But sorry, I've lost my thoughts. So
Okay, can you then explain what you proposed on both sides a police force, right?
yes.
If you're denying our militia, which I proposed, which I'm deeply upset about, I would just like to hear what differentiates this proposed police force from a militia. Because in the same way that
They'll be integrated with the British forces.
Well, I
British
believe
oversight
the
of-
word militia has connotations that are associated with police force. I think what we're trying to set up here is a police force that wouldn't have, that is more, it's less, what am I trying to say? It's less wide-reaching in its influence and more kind of
Local government.
local. That's the word.
Let's have applause for a second. Constable, could you please bring the mufti back in? As long as he can control himself.
Can we censor his speech for the rest of the
He
commission?
can talk for 1 minute at a time.
Mufti, as long as you can control your
I think he's
emotions,
talked
we
for
will allow
plenty
you
of
to sit.
minutes.
He's been talking the entire time.
Well,
He
yeah,
doesn't-
back
he doesn't have any voice.
Can you control yourself, Mufti?
I say nothing.
Good
I'll
idea.
take that as a yes.
Good idea.
So,
I can understand your concerns that this militia that I proposed, you feel will only lead to more violence. But last week we received threats from Mr. Zaytoun. Just now we received threats of violence from the Mufti himself, who claims to cover the views of all that we can trust in your abilities because of the Arabs.
Your police force will be sufficient to protect you, but it will not be
How do
unified
you ensure that?
See, I disagree.
because it will receive training,
From
proper
who?
training from the British, from us. But we will not allow it to become unified into a Jewish army.
it'll also be within a Jewish
Same
majority.
goes with
We
the.
never said we
with
wanted
the-
a Jewish army. How about a Haganah
mean,
What,
I
what
did.
exactly is the
I
Iron
did.
Wall?
Okay,
then?
please. We have about 4 minutes, so we'd like to just take 2 more. Go ahead, Mr.
Well,
Nashibi.
I was just going to say in response, their goal is to prevent future violence. And while you're promoting your force as defensive, which it may purely be defensive, Arabs outside that don't know that could just see you massing a force of Jews on their own that is just a Jewish force, and it could intimidate them. And that's why the unified police force would be from people from both sides, and that would not intimidate anyone on either side. I think that by even a defensive force would promote future violence just by you having it.
We do not want to militarize either the Arab province or the Jewish canton.
Okay, well then, I would
Merely
just
for
like to
domestic
suggest that maybe
Safety
I can
purposes,
take part
security.
in training these forces, both Arabs and Jews, just to make sure that everyone understands the true, like, ways to defend,
Okay,
because
we'll take that into
We will
consideration.
discuss.
Mr. Ben Gurion and
Good idea.
Mr.
Understand.
Husseini, and then we
Yes.
have no more time. Go ahead, Mr. Ben Gurion.
I'll say to Mr. What's
Oh.
your name? Mr. Husseini, by all means, please.
Just to basically closing remarks, like as I said in my response to the Pew report, I think it's important that British, you guys are here, right? You guys have interrupted the flow of power and the ability of Arab majority to have power over the masses, right? As you said earlier, you guys recognize that the Mufti is an important and integral part in controlling the masses. And I would advise the commission and the commissioners to put support behind the Mufti so that that interruption of flow of power will be alleviated, and that he will be able to address minority forces that seek to really bring about violence and aren't going to obtain what we as Arabs are looking for. By supporting the Mufti in the report, and formally you're giving Arab majority back in the hands of where it belongs.
Okay.
I do.
Go ahead.
I do have a question for the Mufti. If we were to give you, and this is hypothetical, so don't get upset. if control was in your hands, would you allow the Jews to govern themselves at all? Would you allow them control, civil control?
It purely depends on the scope of what you're talking about. I can't answer that.
If they were allowed to, govern their legislature, if they were allowed to have their own kind of political system within your own system, within an Arab majority, would that be amenable to you?
I don't seek to impose the Muslim religion or any sort of faith upon the Jews. My main concern here is that their culture is so different than ours that it's difficult for us to raise our children alongside them when they run around, when their children run around in shorts and skirts, and ours see that.
that's our right.
Women of the
I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to the commissioners asking me a question. So the bottom line is that we need to address, first off, that we have different ways of life. And once we recognize that, then we can start to make progress with how we will govern ourselves. But the issue here, why you guys are here, as I've said before, is to prevent future violence. And to address that, you need to address the things that I've laid out in my report. I have directly pointed to the causes of those disturbances. One of them is the build-up next to the holy places, and that's one thing you can easily deal with. Number two is the continued presence of Zionists it's just like the fear for existence is the other thing you have to
Mr.
address.
Mufti, I don't believe you answered my question. How would you allow the Jews to govern themselves if you were in control?
I did answer the question. I said
I don't think you did.
I
Would
answered
you
the
allow
question by
them
saying that it
political
purely
control
depends on the
of
scope.
their own affairs?
It purely depends on the scope. You want to give them a government? Absolutely
That's a
not.
cop-out.
What am I supposed to say? You're giving me a complete hypothetical. I can't.
Yes, so you're supposed to accept the hypothetical world in which I don't choose.
I only accept God's world. I don't accept hypothetical worlds. Their worlds.
I want to thank all of you for your hard work in getting up to speed and your conducting this. This is the sort of interaction I hoped for, and I'm glad we've gotten there. There's one more week of the simulation. Please consult the schedule and assignment sheet if you have any question.
So I'm never coming as Musa.